In this video, it's obviously going to be instant reaction to the release of the brackets. Has UCLA been set up to fail? And has South Carolina been disrespected? But has it been good disrespect to South Carolina? Because to me, if I'm disrespected like this, I am pretty darn happy. Before we start, if you enjoy the content, then please subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. All right, let's get straight into it and run through Spokane Region 1. So, yes, in an upset, UCLA is the overall number one seed for the tournament. So, UCLA number one going against UC San Diego. The other two in that first round will be Richmond versus Georgia Tech. And this is tough for UCLA. So, I mean, they'll get, if it's chalk, then they'll face potentially Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has a good backcourt. In the bottom part of the bracket, it is Baylor, number 4 Baylor, hosting Grand Canyon at number 13. And then disrespected Ole Miss is number 5 going against Ball State. So again, not easy for UCLA. They've got to play Georgia Tech, and then in the Sweet 16, they would meet the winner if it goes to chalk versus Baylor and Ole Miss. Both of those are good teams. Baylor with Von Lay might be able to match up with Lauren Betts. They already beat Baylor handily early in the season, but it could be an interesting matchup in the rematch. Now, the bottom side of this region would be number 2 seed NC State. So they grab the 2 seed going against Vermont. And then it's Michigan State, number 7 versus Harvard, 10 seed. And then the other part of that bracket, or the upper part, would be LSU versus the San Diego, and then it's Florida State, the number 6 versus George Mason. Obviously, LSU is the 3 seed, so all those games would be at LSU and in the first round. And NC State obviously is hosting, would be the host for Vermont, and then the winner of Michigan State Harvard. So again, to me, Spokane 1 looks tough. Like the second round games, if they go to chalk, are all good matchups. So you would have Ole Miss going against potentially Baylor, UCLA versus Georgia Tech, which should be okay, and then Florida State versus LSU. Now, I'm not saying these are going to go to chalk, but if they do, those are good matchups. And even Michigan State and NC State, that could turn into a good matchup as well. On paper, I like all of those. Now let's move over to the other side of the tournament, and it's Birmingham 2. And South Carolina is the 1 seed, but overall for the tournament, they are the 2 seed. The disrespect. But thanks again. You'll see Birmingham. This side of the tournament looks good, in my opinion. So South Carolina versus Tennessee Tech, which is the 16 seed. And then they will face the winner of Utah, Indiana. In the lower part of the bracket is number 4 Maryland, and they host number 13 Norfolk State, and then they play at Maryland, the winner of Alabama, Green Bay. Now this is the one, Maryland, the 4 seed. If you're SEC, you would say Ole Miss and Tennessee potentially have been done over by playing in a hard conference, that they're better than Maryland. Maryland would say, no, we did more. You can argue that till the cows come home. In the tournament, we'll see who does better in the tournament. The bottom part of Birmingham 2, it would be number 3 seed is North Carolina. They have Oregon State, and then they will play at North Carolina, the winner of West Virginia, who's the 6th, going against number 11 Columbia v. Washington. Whoever wins that plays West Virginia, and then the winner of that goes on to play the winner of North Carolina, Oregon State. Unlikely to win, but I think everybody is rooting for 14 Oregon State just because the job Scott Rueck did. His whole team abandoned him, and he still gets them back to the tournament. Now, the bottom part of the bracket, it is 2 seed Duke. They are hosting Lehigh, and then it's Vanderbilt, Oregon. They will face the winner of Vanderbilt, Oregon. The 7 is Vanderbilt, and number 10 seed is Oregon. As I mentioned before, South Carolina is disrespected, but this run looks very nice. I think they feel very comfortable versus Utah, Indiana, and I think they're more than happy to match up versus Maryland. And Duke and North Carolina. If it goes to chalk, I think they're more than happy to play either one of those, as neither one of those teams are offensive juggernauts. So I think South Carolina feels like we can shut them down with our defense. If it goes chalk in the second round games, curious to watch Alabama face off versus Maryland. Look out for the upset there in SEC disrespect. Will they get the upset there as well? Vanderbilt versus Duke. Look out for Vanderbilt because they can score very well. Their offense is really good. It's a question, will Duke's defense shut down Vanderbilt's offense? The other one to keep an eye on is Utah Indiana, the first round matchup. I think that's very close. I need to look at their numbers. Utah gave South Carolina a game. Obviously, they had Elisa Peely last year, and South Carolina had Cardoso, but they still have Neepkins, who's a really good player. During this year, I believe they lost Kennedy McQueen, but she is now back. So Utah could be dangerous for them if they beat Indiana, but it's a nice run for South Carolina, especially when you look at Birmingham 3, which the number 1 seed is Texas. They are the 3 seed, and they face off versus High Point Panthers or William and Mary, and they'll be hosting the winner of either the Illini or Creighton. And then the lower part of that bracket, it is who is it? Ohio State is hosting as a 4 seed. Yeah, that's a little bit weak as well. I question Ohio State a little bit versus Montana State, and then they will face the winner of Tennessee and the South Florida Bulls. And then the lower part of the bracket, it's Michigan versus the winner of Iowa State Princeton. That's a good play-in game. I'm curious about that one because Princeton runs a good offense, and then Iowa State, who hasn't been as good as expected this year in the Big 12. And the host of that one is Notre Dame. They are the 3 seed versus Stephen F. Austin. And then the lower down bracket, it is 2 TCU hosting Fairleigh Dickinson. And then they play the winner of Louisville, Nebraska. That is the Haley Van Lith. We are going to get you to match up versus Louisville, whether you like it or not. We tried last year, but Louisville got upset. Hopefully this year it doesn't happen and you two can face off. Notre Dame is the official disrespected team for their poor play at the end of the year. I forget what she said, the conference lady, something about a sequence of events led to Notre Dame's downgrading from the 2 seed to the number 3 seed. In this, the other one that stands out to me in the first round, Tennessee, South Florida Bulls. That will be interesting. I don't know. Anything can happen in that game. If Tennessee comes out, they can be great if they hit the 3-point shots, and they can be a real problem. And then the matchup between if Tennessee wins that versus Ohio State, that's interesting. Like they're sort of looking at each other in a mirror in terms of liking to press and put pressure on teams. Again, Tennessee could flame out in the first round or they could go awesome. I don't know. Texas would be happy as I think they feel like they could control the game versus Tennessee or Ohio State. And then they've played Notre Dame before. I think they feel comfortable in that matchup. If it was to go chalk and be Texas versus TCU, you would have Texas defense versus that TCU offense. TCU does not play very good defense, at least in terms of points per game they give up per 100 possession. But it might not even get there as the Notre Dame TCU. If it went chalk, Notre Dame TCU rematch could be interesting. TCU took Notre Dame in the Cayman Island Classic, I think it was, but I'm sure Notre Dame's looking for revenge. Notre Dame, much like Tennessee, could they be an early flameout and just their season finishes badly, or was it just fatigue and they'll get back into their groove and have a good tournament? That's the question. That's the $1 million question with Notre Dame. In terms of Final Four matchups, I think South Carolina is happy with Texas or TCU. I think they're comfortable with both those matchups. They took down Texas obviously twice, and then TCU they blew them out. If I was South Carolina, the team I would not want to see would be Notre Dame. If Notre Dame gets their groove back, just with Hidalgo and Miles in the backcourt, plus they have the size to compete with Caval. Yes, if I was South Carolina, I'd be rooting for Texas or TCU to take care of Notre Dame. I would not want any part has been disrespected. It's the Rodney Dangerfield, and this has implications obviously for UConn, nasty for UCLA because USC is one. They go against number 16 UNC Greensboro, and they're hosting obviously the 8-9 is Cal, Mississippi State. And then lower in the bracket, it is Kentucky, who's very, very solid as a 4 seed versus Liberty, hosting the winner of Kansas State Fairfield. Then the bottom part of the bracket, UConn is number 2, going against number 15 Arkansas State. And then the other part of that bracket is number 7 Oklahoma State versus number 10 South Dakota State. Now, I did numbers on Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was solid in the Big 12 this year. The top part of this bracket, it is number 3 Oklahoma hosting versus Florida Gulf Coast, who's number 14, and then 6 Iowa versus number 11 Murray State. So in this one, again, this is the Rodney Dangerfield no respect because USC beat UCLA 2 out of 3 times, but it was always the case that UCLA was going to be ranked higher than USC. If you're USC and say it's unfair, because in the tournament, in the conference tournament, it's played 3 consecutive. At least get a day rest in between 2 games. The thing that's obviously surprising with this, with TV, do you really want UConn and USC matching up in an Elite Eight game with? Do you want to lose Beckers or potentially Juju Watkins that early from the tournament? And if it goes to chalk, that sets up UCLA versus USC for a fourth matchup. On the other side as well, if it goes chalk with Texas for a fourth matchup, and they went to the tournament director who said, yes, we looked at this, but due to the S curve, whatever that is, somebody could explain it in the notes. But due to the S curve, this was the best way to set it up to make it fair. So be it. But man, I think I feel bad for UCLA because Baylor's not going to be an easy matchup if it goes to chalk or Ole Miss. And then hanging around there, they'll probably have some PTSD because if LSU makes it through, they've got to play LSU again, and they're going to have flashbacks to last year if LSU gets through NC State. And it just makes it that would be tough. And even if you make it to the Final Four, then you could have either USC or UConn waiting for you. So their mission got really hard for UCLA. So I don't yeah, I again, South Carolina got disrespected because they did not get the overall 1 seed for the tournament, but I think they would be much happier about their draw versus UCLA. In terms of the second round matchups in Spokane for Kansas State matching up versus Kentucky could be interesting, but it depends on Aoki Lee and her knee, or no, her foot, I'm sorry, and her availability. That could be interesting. Then Kentucky could give USC a good matchup, but again, I think the big guards would handle Kentucky in that 16 matchup, in the Sweet 16 matchup. On the other side, Iowa has good numbers. They're a strong team. That Iowa Oklahoma second round matchup looks good on paper. And I wonder if Iowa could get up on that. I think they matched up. I can't remember if they matched up with them. No, I think I'm getting that confused with Oklahoma Duke, who matched up in the Easter tournament. On the other side, Oklahoma State, like I said, their numbers are okay in quad one games, but I don't see UConn having any trouble getting to the Elite Eight. The question would be with them, Iowa could give them a game if Iowa makes it through, or Oklahoma, but I think they're very comfortable with those teams. But I think it's really going to come down between UConn and USC. And whoever makes it through, that is just a brutal, brutal matchup for UCLA. Obviously, USC got them 2 out of 3 times. UConn as well is able to play in so many different ways. I say that potentially they might have to go through LSU again or NC State, but as well in their own region, the winner of Ole Miss Baylor, yeah, I see them, despite being over the overall 1 seed, as the big loser. I don't think USC and UConn would be real happy about having to match up against each other again. I saw them being in opposite sides of the bracket. For me, it would have been interesting if they would have swapped Notre Dame and Oklahoma. And I don't know all the interconference stuff if they could have done that. but then that would have set up a rematch between UConn and Notre Dame, which would have been fun. And then if Notre Dame got over UConn, then another matchup between Carolina versus Texas. Now, you'll argue the other way and say, well, we'll get to see Texas versus Notre Dame, and that was a good game that went into double overtime or a single overtime. I can't remember. It all blends together. So either way, they're going to be good basketball and a lot of good first round matchups. The one thing I cannot stand is if South Carolina wins, and I don't have any problem with South Carolina winning the championship, and I think they've got a good shot to it because the way the bracket is set out. But if they win it, we'll hear the whole disrespect card, and they deserve it. The reason the tournament spokesman said that the Bruins were ranked ahead of them, two key factors by more than 10 points, 10 or 12. They controlled that game the whole way through. As well, bad losses, and they said that the bad loss that South Carolina had to UConn, those were the mitigating factors which put UCLA ahead. And I don't know. I don't know if one bad loss to UConn is worse than two losses to USC. And part of this might be bias on my part against the Bruins and in favor of South Carolina just due to history that Corey Close has never made it to a Final Four, and obviously South Carolina has all their success. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Maybe this is the team UCLA can break out with and break that ceiling and get to the Final Four. I'm curious to see it all, that's for sure. And then for me, the content creator. So the committee took away my Hannah Hidalgo Notre Dame matchup with AZ Fudd. I already had the thumbnail done. How dare you, committee? So Jeff Walls, you better not ruin Louisville versus TCU. I want that matchup. That'll give me one video for sure. Last thing I'll mention is I think in Spokane 4, I think we will get UConn versus Iowa. I'm calling it early. I think Iowa will get Oklahoma, and then at nauseum in the Sweet 16 in the previews, we will see the moving pick that was set by Aaliyah Edwards and how that impacted and everything else. So that'll go on. And yeah, I suspect it'll go chalk. It'll be USC versus Kentucky, but I think USC's length is going to be trouble for Kentucky's guards and Amore. And as well, I think USC will use a lot of Samuels on Amore just to give her trouble and just work her hard off to get the ball. And then whenever she doesn't have the ball, just make her work really, really hard to get the ball, in addition to getting Kennedy Smith on her. Now we will finish it there. I want your takes. What interests you in terms of the matchups? What do you think I have wrong or right in terms of the matchups and who got done over and didn't get done over? Do you think, like me, that South Carolina, although disrespected, has a very nice bracket? And do you think UCLA has been set up to fail in that region, much like UConn and USC would not be happy to be in Spokane? By the way, these are 100% my own thoughts. I have not read or seen anything else. I saw the selection show at lunch while I was at work. That's all I've seen. Yeah, so give me feedback if I've missed something, a coach saying something or anything like that. More than happy to have it. I think they were going to go to Dawn to get her opinion on things, but I have not seen anything. This is fresh off coming from work and not seeing anything from anybody. This is strictly my opinion. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.